Okay, sorry everyone for the technical glitches. First time using feed loop. Probably caused quite a few of the tech stuff myself. So we're still going to talk about making math stick. And we'll still address everything that I was hoping for within the session. But once again, I apologize for any tech issues I've caused. Just a little bit about me. I'm a classroom teacher. I was a math coach, a curriculum consultant, and the provincial math lead where I coordinated professional learning for my province, PEI. I think I was working at the board district for about approximately 8 years. From there, I moved into school administration as I wanted to get back to the classroom and get back teaching. So I was a VP and now I'm a principal. But all throughout my career, I've kept hearing and I experienced myself the stress that teachers are under in regards to instruction and student learning. And I truly believe that teachers are going above and beyond. I don't think teachers can work any harder than what they are. So I decided to write a book that will support teachers in working smarter, not harder. So what Making Math Stick is about, it's full of learning and instructional strategies that make a difference. And the one thing that I wanted to do is I wanted strategies that were effective, but that were also manageable and sustainable. And what I've seen in this book and what I've included in this book is these are strategies that I've seen make a significant difference. And I've seen teachers being able to get the instructional goals for student learning that they've sought after without burning without burning the candle at both ends and without burning out. So what I want to share with you today are some strategies that I think we can make math stick with. And really what making math stick is about, it's about retrieval practice in mathematics. So I had this activity because I like starting off with each PD I have. I like to have actual tasks so that participants can think through problems and can work through them so that we're in the mindset of a student. So this one came from Enrich Math, and it's place the numbers 1 to 6 in squares so that each number is the difference between the two numbers just below it. So placing the numbers 1 to 6 in squares so that the numbers below it have a difference of the two. And I'll give another 30 seconds, but if anybody wants to talk about a strategy they use to solve this, you can turn on your microphone and talk. Anyone able to solve this? Did anyone try something and it didn't work? So they had to try a different strategy? Seeing as I can't see the screen, is there anyone out there, or am I just talking to the virtual world? Okay. Oh, you can't use your mic. Wow. Okay. Sorry. So I'll be going back and forth between here so I can see everybody. So we'll go through here again. And so then what I want to talk about today, and I think this is important, and I want to talk about how you would define learning. What does learning mean to you? And for this, I'm going to ask you just to type in a brief little sentence or two about how you would define learning. If you could type that in the chat box, because that'll frame what our conversation is. So how would you define learning? And I'm going to go back to the screen view from FeedLoop so that I can kind of read some of these. How would you define learning? Does anyone want to type in that, how they would define learning? So I have Sheena's volunteering. I define learning by either gaining knowledge that you didn't already know or adding to what you already know. Thank you. Wait another few seconds. Acquiring new skills and knowledge from Michelle Coleman. Thank you. The acquisition of knowledge from Desiree. Thank you. So what I want us to think about is how we define knowledge plays a large part in how we go about framing our instruction and having us determine what counts as successful learning. But I want to ask you this. Does this sound familiar if you're a primary teacher? It spent a lot of time in the fall on estimating with the referent, used concrete objects and pictures. It's now winters, and when asked to estimate, students still count the items and record that as their estimate. Trying to encourage students to use reference and still no luck. Why were they able to demonstrate success with estimation using reference in the fall, but now it seems like they never experienced it? They had it so well, but now they say they don't remember doing it. Or what about this one for an intermediate teacher? Solving equations is an important part of the grade 8 math curriculum. At the end of the unit, students could solve equations involving a single variable, and they could isolate this, whether it was added, subtracted, multiplied, or divided. Now spring, and student can't isolate a variable if it's multiplied or divide. Much of the class says it's hard, and they need step-by-step support when working on such equations. Where did all their success earlier in the year go? Or even this, from an elementary student. So the first two were from teachers. This is from an elementary student. At the start of the year, we did place value with whole numbers. Then we worked on decimals. It was the same as whole numbers, only using decimals. Did great with expanded form, standard form, and writing numbers in words. But now before the second report card, which would be about March, the teacher gave some questions on decimals, and the student couldn't remember to put and in, and the student forgot the place value names of the places to the right of the decimal. This student didn't think that it was fair that the teacher asked students these questions about place value before the teacher reviewed the concept. And here is what I want to ask you. What do we tend to do before a provincial assessment? Before a provincial standardized assessment? I'm guessing if it's like most jurisdictions in Canada and the States, teachers will say we review. But I want to ask you, is it really reviewing what we're doing? If we stop before an assessment just to go over content, is it more cramming than we are? Are we really focusing on a score, and are we trying to do everything we can to cram in as much material so it's fresh in the students' minds? Think about when you were in university. Before a midterm, what would you do? I'm guessing some of you, if not all of you, as I've done too, you would cram the night before, and you would try to go over as much information as you can, only to recall it the next day or the next couple of days. But did that information stay with us? No. So what I want to say is, and think about how you define learning too. The traditional view of learning tends to focus on getting things into the heads of students. We tend to talk about learning new concepts, acquiring new skills, acquiring new knowledge. We tend to focus on getting things in. And why we do that, and one way we found that helps us with that, is something like block practice. Think about how our year is set up, or how our textbook is set up, or even how our classroom is set up in terms of an assessment model. We tend to focus on topic A, teach that, give questions related to topic A, and then move on to topic B. And then we focus on topic B, and we give questions on that, then we move on to topic C. So it's almost as if we've completely transposed math into units of studies where they're isolated, and we teach, test, and move on. And an example of this would be another form of block practice is if we have lesson topic A, and just say if that's place value of whole numbers, we give practice questions and corresponding focus topics, corresponding focus tasks on lesson A, topic A. Then when we move on to topic B, we do the same thing. What we do is we've compartmentalized it, and our practice focuses specifically on the concept we were applying. So then why do we do this? Well, there's three different reasons. We're provided with a curriculum, and we feel pressure to move through it at a brisk pace to ensure that all content is covered. So that's a coverage perspective. We're taking our focus off learning, and we're focusing on covering. Reason number two, classroom assessments typically measure students' ability on the content that has just been covered. This assesses student knowledge and understanding on a short-term basis. And three, students are required to take standardized tests, and to ensure students do well on these assessments, teachers teach to the test. It's about getting material into the head. And I think it's a good thing when we have tests that are structured on curriculum. That's a good thing. And teaching to that focuses student learning on the curriculum. But I think sometimes we're just focused on kind of covering it, kind of, I taught that, check, I'm moving on. And I think what we tend to do is we focus on getting information into the heads of students. And what we take away from this approach, we have three things. And I'm going to start with illusion of mastery. When we give students practice questions all the time on a concept we've just explored, what the focus is, students don't need to stop and think, which strategy do I use? Instead, students just need to think about, how do I apply this specific strategy? So we're removing the important thinking point in math and having students to decide what strategy or what approach to take to solve a problem, because they know we've been focusing on multiplication of 2-digit by 2-digit numbers these past 2 weeks. So any problem I'm going to get with that, I'm just going to multiply the two numbers in the problem. And what that creates is an illusion of mastery. Students may think that they understand a concept, and they may be getting assessment data back or evaluative data back from the teachers indicating that they've done well, but they don't really understand the concept. They don't really understand when to apply that concept. And then what we have is an issue of retention and application. If we're always focusing on getting information into the student's head, then how do we support them in trying to find this information and being able to apply it and know when they apply it? And does success really indicate understanding? Here is a simplified example. And this one just shows what the structure of the assessment was. When my niece was in grade 9, she came home with a fractions quiz, and she showed me, and I said, how did you do? And she said, well, I have 112%, which in and of itself is problematic, 112%. But I digress. And I said, oh, what was it on? She said, multiplication of fraction. And the first 20 problems had, they were just given like problem 1, 1/8 multiplied by 3/5. Problem 2, 4/9 multiplied by 7/8, and so on. And then there was 2 word problems at the bottom of the sheet. And I said, oh, and I read the first problem. Vancouver Island is 1/10 the size of British Columbia. British Columbia is 1/7 the size of Canada. What is Vancouver Island in relation to Canada? Well, she had 1/70th. And I said, well, how did you know that? She said, well, I just multiplied the 2 fractions. And I said, well, how did you know that you needed to multiply? She said, well, we've been doing it for 3 weeks. And right below my name on the test, it said multiplication of fractions. So I just did that. I said, oh, I said, did you even read the problem? She said, yeah, no, I didn't even read the problem. So I'm just wondering, do you see that in your classrooms where a student might be able to demonstrate as if they understand a concept, but then later on, they need to ask you for support and they need step-by-step support in working through that? Do we see an issue with students being able to recall previous learning? Do we see any concern with that? If we're focusing on regretfully, yes, I see Tiffany saying, Carrie saying yes. And I see this quite a bit too. I see this in a lot of schools and districts that I'm now working with, in that we tend to focus on getting things in. Yes, they always think they can just grab the numbers. It's true. But here's my question. Do they think that because that's how we set up our instruction and our review? I really think review is a word that's misused significantly in education, because I don't think what we do is review. I think we cram and throw stuff at students instead of systematically review how we approach concepts. So what I want to do today is I just want to share some strategies with you about how to review. So we talked about the definition of learning being traditional, about getting information in. But what I want to kind of move us into is a broadened view of learning. Learning is the acquisition of knowledge and skills, definitely. But this is the second part, and having these readily available from memory to support future meaning-making opportunities. This is what we, I think, fall short on in the education system. Do we support students in having them readily available so that they can apply them? Because we tend to focus on getting information into heads, but we need to support students in a way that they can retrieve this information. And just to give you a thought about it, so here are the 3 stages of learning. The first stage, I think everybody would say we do a good job of getting knowledge into the heads. I think that's what education has been focused on. How do we get knowledge into the heads of students? And I'll say that we're doing a bit better with this one, a bit. We're making connections with this new knowledge, and we're making connections with previous learning or previous knowledge, so that students have a way to synthesize it, that they're adding layers to the memory. This is the one, the retrieval one, that we struggle with and that we need support with, and that I've been supporting many schools with, is we need to support students in getting knowledge out of heads. Retrieval is a process of reaching back and bringing something we previously learned into mind. Because here is the point. When we're teaching a concept or we're highlighting a concept, that's not learning for students. That is them acquiring knowledge. But we want them to go beyond just acquiring knowledge into a way that they make meaning with that knowledge, and that becomes learning, and then they can retrieve that learning to solve. And here's an example. Think about the double-double multiplicative strategy, 7 multiplied by 4. We can think of 7 multiply by 2, 7 groups of 2 to find the product 14. Then you add 14 and 14 to find the sum. So instruction focusing solely on teaching or highlighting the double-double strategy represents the encoding strategy, because we're highlighting the knowledge, we're highlighting the new knowledge. For consolidation, that's when we can compare and contrast the double-double strategy maybe with other strategies such as the double strategy, the clock facts, and the nifty 9 strategies. So we're highlighting similarities and differences for that. And the retrieval strategy comes at it that you might give the students different multiplicative questions, and they have to maybe put a circle around the ones they'd use the double strategy for, put a square around the ones they use the clock fact strategies, and put a triangle around the ones that they use the nifty 9. So what they're doing is they're going back to their memory and they're looking at that problem and they're determining on their own which strategy they're going to use and why. So that's the part we've been missing in block practice. Now what students have to do is they have to go back and determine why they're picking this strategy and what strategy they need. And just to ground this in research, which I think is important, retrieval is really based on cognitive science. Every time a memory is retrieved, the individual must think about it again, reconstruct it in terms of previous knowledge and current experience, and then reconsolidate it. So by doing that, the memory strengthened. And the interesting part is the brain organizes our memories more efficiently every time they're retrieved. By strengthening the pathway to the memories and increasing the retrieval cues, the brain naturally makes these memories more accessible. So the more we go back to them and the more we find them and apply them, the stronger the pathway to those memories are and the easier it becomes for students to retrieve it. So that's why, therefore, it can be argued that retrieval is a more powerful learning activity than encoding. So think about how much time we spend on encoding, getting information into the heads. And now what we can take from this research is that retrieval is actually much more powerful than that. And so you're probably thinking, how do I retrieve? There's really 3 ways. You can space your practice. So instead of clumping all of your practice questions on multiplying 2-digit by 2-digit numbers in one time period, spread it out over time. Have students come back to it so they're constantly interrupting the forgetting process. Mixing practice up. Instead of having all the same concept within a practice session, mix the concepts up so that for each question, students have to determine, what's this question about and what strategy do I use? And by combining that spacing and mixing, it's called mixed practice, or like interleaved practice, that you're constantly coming back to concepts and you're exploring multiple concepts. And feedback is important so that students are aware if they're correct or not. So here would be an example. The block practice would be in the first row of this column. And now I do want to kind of pause. There is a place for block practice. When you're introducing a concept or when you're working on a concept, block practice does have its benefits. What I am suggesting is for mixed practice or mixed review, after the concept has been introduced in the year, it's still important to come back to those concepts that you've already explored. But instead of just cramming before an assessment, or instead of just focusing on the same concept for each review session, focus on different ones. So you'll see in review session 1, the teacher focuses on the 4 different concepts. But then when the teacher comes back to review session 2, and it might be the next week or the next day or the next 2 weeks, they're going to come back to those 4 concepts again, and they're going to mix them up. So you're seeing over 4 different review sessions, students are reviewing each of the concepts, but they're spacing those concepts up. Whereas in block practice, all the concepts are on, all the questions deal with the same concept. And when A is finished, done, so the next review session only focuses on B. So you're only getting 1 session to focus on a concept. Whereas in space and mixed practice, you're doing it over a period of time, which helps when you keep going back to a concept. What I want to ask you, have you done much work with this? I'll come back here and just hoping people can go in the chat box. Have you done much work with this? So Desiree saying she used retrieval grids with grade 3 last year. Okay, I'll go back here. Because what I want to do now is I want to kind of go over some strategies that you can bring into the class. And what I find with these, and these are just a handful from my book, Making Math Stick. I have like, I want to say there's like 14 chapters, and each chapter is filled with strategies. So I've just taken a handful out here just to kind of share with that. So what I have here is 4 learning strategies and 4 instructional strategies. So let's focus on the learning strategies first. Here is a great strategy, and this is something you can do later in the year. It's comparing and contrasting 2 concepts. And what it does is it requires the student to examine both concepts closely and to determine their similarities and differences. What this does is that this process helps the student zero in on foundational aspects of both concepts, thereby adding crucial layers of meaning to the student's memories. So an example might be, let's say what we've done is we have worked on, let's say earlier in the fall, continuous and discrete data in stats and probability. It might be a month or 2 down the road. You might say, okay, boys and girls, okay, class, I want you to compare and contrast continuous and discrete data. Go. So this forces them to go back into their memory and to think about these concepts. And it forces them because they've not seen it in a while, so they have to interrupt that forgetting process. And by going back to the memory, they have to reconstruct it. Or we could say compare and contrast area and perimeter for primary grades, K to 3 or grade 3. Or we might say compare and contrast scatter plots and circle graphs for intermediate students. So retrieval practice and making math a stick, it's not this grandiose work demand, but it's a way to use questions that you already have strategically in time and mixing them up so the students are constantly going back. Here would be another example. Dual coding. So dual coding is just a fancy way to build multiple layers. What it is simply, it combines words with pictures. So research supporting dual coding emphasizes that students learn better when they encounter concepts as a combination of words and visuals. Together, words and visuals are more powerful than alone. So an example might be for intermediate, junior high, might be use both words and visuals to describe the expression 5C subtract 2. For elementary, 4 to 6, it might be use both words and visuals to describe a translation of 3 to the left. And for K to 3, for grade well, grade 3 really, use both words and visuals to describe an array. So it's a quick little thing, and these can be used as a math warm-up at the beginning of a lesson, or it can be used as an exit slip at the end of a lesson. It's just ways to constantly keep going back. The free write strategy. Now, some people might think, oh, this is just time not well spent, but it actually is. There's research supporting this writing to learn activity. And the point is to generate as much information as possible related to a topic. So from this activity, students can organize their thinking and revise their thoughts, all the while strengthening their connections to the knowledge. And it serves as a retrieval practice, and it strengthens the pathways to the retrieved information and consolidates it. It's a flexible learning tool, and it can be used at any time. And it might be, what can you tell me about multiplication? What can you tell me about transformations? Or what can you tell me about surface area? And taking free write to the next step. So free write, there's no constraints on it in terms of number of words. One other learning strategy would be 30 words or less. And similar to a free write, 30 words or less is an opportunity to write about a concept in a limited amount of time. The only difference is that 30 words or less has a cap on the total number of words. So by simply introducing this cap, students need to be more flexible. No, students need to be more focused on choosing the most crucial information from their memory. Along with this, students need to be concise in what they write and to structure the information in an organized format so as to avoid exceeding the word count cap. So all 4 of those strategies, dual coding, compare, contrast, free write, and 30 words are less. You can pull those out at any time, and you can have students engage in those strategies for concepts that they previously explored. Because I think in math, we do too much of one and done. We introduce it, we teach it, we test, and then we move on. And then we panic before a standardized provincial assessment that we have to go back to it. But if we incorporate these retrieval strategies into the year and into your math instruction, it becomes the norm, and it strengthens their understanding and their ability to retrieve these. Any questions that you want to type into the chat box? I'll go back here. Are there any questions? Yeah, I see Tiffany like to start the class by reviewing former skills. Yeah, you can definitely do that, and you can use some of these to do that. And it really is about working smarter, just by how we sequence these activities and how we interact with them, whether it being an entrance slip, a warm-up, or an exit slip, or a center in your class if you're doing workshops, or a station, or an independent practice. There's lots of ways to do this. Anybody else want to type anything? Okay, so we're going to go back, and now what we're going to talk about is instructional strategies. So we're going to look at 4: daily cumulative review, choice board, then now later grid, and year plans. So daily cumulative review is really building in this mixed review daily, and it really consists of 2 main concepts. You have 3 to 4 questions, and each question addresses a different concept. And how I've done it with schools is you can look at your assessment data to highlight any trends you see of any needing additional support. You can work with your staffs to talk about, okay, what are the 3 to 4 crucial concepts for this year that we need students to have success with, that'll help them with those concepts and with other concepts. And then the one thing I've done with some schools that I've worked with is we have identified concepts for each of the grade, kind of like the foundational learnings for each of the grades, as a way to highlight those so that each grade is kind of building on the previous grade so that it's a continuum. And what daily cumulative review is, you give about 4 to 5 minutes for students to solve the questions. You give 4 questions. You can either post it on a whiteboard or students can solve it on their whiteboard. And then the teacher checks those questions in about 4 to 5 minutes. This is the time that the teacher models a correct solution, and that the teacher gives students feedback through what he or she modeled on the board so that students know if they're correct or not. And what you can do with this, you can collect data on an ongoing basis. So here are 2 examples. One is from a primary teacher's example, and one is from an elementary. So you can see the teacher, they would start every math class with the 4 questions, and you can see on the primary, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they dealt with the same 4 concepts: place value, perimeter, subtraction, and equations. And this was from a grade 3 class. And the teacher would continue focusing on these 4 concepts for like several weeks. And then after about like just say a month and a half or so, the teacher would identify 4 other concepts to do for some time. And they keep going back and forth to those from those 4 concepts during one cycle to a different 4. So the same 8 would be cycled through. And what the teacher found, what the school found, was that the students became significantly stronger and able to recall this previous learning because the students kept continuously going back to it. And you can see a similar example for the elementary example. And the teacher decided that the main concepts were fractions, place value, decimals, and multiplication. Now, an example from what my wife, she was an elementary teacher. She didn't do daily cumulative review every day just because there was other demands. So she did it Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays as a way to keep going back. But she kept going back to those concepts. And just as an example, when I was at one school I was working with as an administrator, for a 5-year period, their average percentage of student meeting expectations on their provincial standardized assessment was 54%. And we did this for 1 year, just pretty much changed and applied the daily cumulative review. And since that, their average percentage of student meeting expectations jumped to 73%. And that was a school with over 650 kids. So you can see there's a significant value added on this. And from what the teacher shared with me when we were working with them, they said it wasn't really additional work. They already had these questions. It was just about using them smarter and a way to use them more strategically to help learning. Instructional strategy 2 could be a choice board. And what a choice board is, it can address one or more concepts, and there's different different guidelines you can use. But the big thing is that students choose which problems they will solve. But they choose that within a restricted format. You might say you need to select one question from each row, or you need to select one question from each column, or one question from each color. And then you can set up the board in a way that you can ensure they address specific concepts. And here would be an example of a choice board that dealt with fractions. And you can see there was different aspects in it. There was represent, label, compare, fractions, and decimals. And what the teacher asked students to do was to pick any 2 tasks from each row. So it was a way that students still had choice. But the interesting part with this one, the teacher would put this up at the beginning of the week, but they would have done fractions earlier in the year. So this was a retrieval practice that the teacher was coming back to it. The teacher kept coming back to the concept so that students would strengthen their ability to recall and apply previous learning. And similar to a choice board, which is structured differently, is Instructional Strategy 3, which is a then, now, later grid. And a then, now, later grid is a 3x3 grid that the top 3 tasks deal with previous learning, the middle tasks deal with current concepts, and the bottom 3 tasks deal with future concepts coming up. And the whole later part, you are dealing with the future concepts by bringing back previous learning from the previous grade as a precursor to it. And the teacher would have this in usually for a week. She would either put it on the board, photocopy it for the students, or I've seen a few teachers that would use this as a Google form. Google Doc. Put it on their Google Classroom, post it up, and then the students would solve it like that. And it's retrieval because the students are continuously cycling through the 3 categories over consecutive weeks. So you can see, and I want to talk briefly about the last one, like the like this row here for a concept coming up. The teacher was just going to introduce multiplying with decimals, but what the teacher knew is, okay, I know that the students have worked in previous years with place value, and I know that they would talk about what is 1/10 of 64. So how can they use that previous learning to help bridge a pathway into this newer concept coming up? So it was retrieving concepts from a previous grade. And the last one, an instructional strategy, which I think has significant impact on student learning, is how our year plan is structured. And I know most provinces and jurisdictions have a plan that is similar to a block plan, kind of like concept A, concept B, concept C. But when you think about it, there's not much opportunity to recall previous learning or to revisit a concept. So one example is a spiral curriculum. And what you do with a spiral curriculum is concepts or outcomes aren't treated in isolation, but you really have 7 or 8 big ideas, and each big ideas consist of multiple outcomes, and you cycle through them throughout the year. So then think of it like a spiral. In the first walkthrough, you go through all 8 big ideas, and you might spend 2 weeks on each idea. So students are just getting an introduction into it. And then cycle 2, which would be probably starting around Christmas-ish break, you would get into cycle 2, which you delve a little bit deeper into it. And you're going through that and you're working through it. And then cycle 3, you really dig down deeper into that. So what it does is students can revisit a concept and they can address any misconceptions they might have had as they return to the concept. And I'm seeing a lot of jurisdictions, both in Canada and the States, moving towards a spiraled curriculum, and the evidence is quite strong supporting that. And another one would be key concepts. So we know that there's some curriculum outcomes that have a higher priority than others. We just know that. There's some outcomes that are weighted more heavily than others. So what some jurisdictions have done is they front-loaded their curriculum with those key concepts as a way that students can spend more time with them, and they can have opportunities to return to any misconceptions they have. And with it being front-loaded, the understanding would be if students really have success with these key concepts, it'll support them with other concepts. So it's kind of like paying it forward. So those would be the 2 types of year plans opposed to the traditional blocked unit plans we have. And just as a way to support, you can visit my website at Costello Math. Everything's free on there. I think it's important to support our educators and support our teachers and schools. And on there, I have instructional videos. I have problems of the week and problem solving. I have a blog and I have classroom connections. And if you want to sign up for like freebies, I know in August, I'm going to be offering free online PD sessions for about 45 minutes, just as a way to kind of prime the pump and to help teachers hit the ground running on when they return. And my book, Making Math Stick, I hear great things about it, great things about the author. That's available through Pembroke Publishing, and it's available as a traditional book. I think it's like $22, and as an e-book, you can get it through there. And there's my contact information. I want to thank you for the session. Sorry about the technical glitches at the beginning. I apologize for that. And if there's any questions, I'll go back to our page. And if there's any questions, do you have any questions for me? Questions going once? So I see, Carrie, does daily cumulative review place number of the day? Do you know what? It doesn't need to, no. I've been supporting teachers in that they can still use number of the day number talks. And one such group I've been working with has been doing daily cumulative review like Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and then number talks. It's just another way. What they found was using daily cumulative review, they could incorporate some of the other important concepts and working through that as a way to constantly bringing it to the forefront. So they can go hand in hand. But I've also seen some jurisdictions say we're only going to go with daily cumulative review. And from that, they've seen tremendous success, both in terms of student learning and, let's be honest, assessment results matter, and they've seen growth in their assessment results. Tiffany's question, what do you think of textbooks? I use textbooks strategically. I use them based on what I need for my class and what I need for my students, but I know it's a resource and I know it's a support, so I think there's some good things in them. So what I've tried to do is, and I've tried to do it with Making Math Stick, and I've helped schools use them as a way to pull what you can use from them so that they are supporting you and they're help reducing your work load, and you're finding ways to use them strategically. I'm going to type my email in here in the chat box. If there's anything I can do for you or your staffs, let me know. I love facilitating PD. I think it's important, and I think that we have to support one another through these times. But if there's anything I can do, reach out. You can send me an email. I can send you my slides, or just reach out if there's ever anything you'd like to talk about math. Thank you, Michelle and Sheena, I see, and Tiffany, and Carrie. So, and Desiree. So, what grades do each of you teach? Like, what do you do as your role? Now I'm just being nosy, but I'd like to kind of know. Okay, Carrie teaches grade 3. Tiffany teaches grade 4. Awesome. Michelle, you're an administrator, like principal, vice principal? Desiree, I have a 60%. Term integrated math, awesome. I'm a substitute, so primary 5 and 6, and I've subbed in every subject. Awesome, Sheena. Awesome. I know I've done, Sheena, I'm also a tutor in language arts. Awesome. I know I've worked with some schools in HRCE, Oyster Pond, Duncan McMillan, Ocean View, Porter's Lake, Basin View. So I know that area. That is awesome. If there's anything I can ever do, reach out. I put my address up here in the box, and you can sign up for free stuff on my website. But thank you so much for taking your time to join me in my session. And I'm wishing you a great rest of your conference, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.